Okay. Good morning, everybody. We'll have people trickling in, but it's such a joy to be with all of you this morning. Jai Ma, welcome to Mangalananda, who is with us with great devotion, and we'll be discussing today the essence of devotion with two folks who had the great blessing of being with the Saint Anandamayi Ma in India. Acharya Mangalananda began his spiritual journey in 1972 under the guidance of Swami Satchitananda, training as a yoga teacher and living in integral yoga ashrams. Inspired by an inner experience of the revered Saint Anandamayi Ma, he traveled to India in 1973 and received mantra initiation directly from her and subsequently resided in her lineage's ashrams. In 2001, he returned to India to establish and teach at a spiritually oriented school for village children, dedicating 12 years to this seva, which means service. Recognized as an Acharya, which is a lineage teacher of Ma Sharanam Ashram, Mangalananda has toured extensively in Europe and the United States, offering kirtan concerts and spiritual workshops. He's now here with us in the San Francisco Bay Area. He continues his devoted service by hosting kirtans classes and maintaining a small ashram dedicated to his guru and lineage. So we'll be exploring devotion today in all of its forms, whether you know your guru or you're curious, whatever that means to you, we're happy to be with you. And of course, we'll be led by our beloved Ramdev Borglum, the director of the Living Dying Project. Thank you all so much for being here. Jai Ma.
Ramdev,
And
Ramdev, I would like to just quickly do some introductory mantras because we always do that in India for anything. Then we can start the actual talking. Is that all right?
please.
Om Akhanda Mandalakaram Vyaptam Yena Characharam Tatpadam Darshitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Gurur Brahma Gurur Vishnu Gurudev Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Parabrahma Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Om Bhavata Bhavranashanye Ananda Ghanamurtaye Dhyana Bhakti Pradayanye Matastubhyam Namo Namaha Sri Sri Anandamayi Mata Ki Jai Sri Sri Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji Ki Jai Apne Apne Satgurudev Bhagavan Ki Jai. Okay, go for
it. Okay, Ram. So it turns out that Mangalananda is my neighbor. I didn't even know that till about a few months ago. Everybody kept saying, you got to meet this guy. And we were at, I went to a kirtan at a local yoga studio that Annabelle is the manager of, is, might be, I don't know. And we bumped into each other, and all of a sudden, there he is, my old brother Mangalananda. I had the great blessing to be in India back in the early 1970s, where, as many of you know, I met Maharaji Neem Karoli Baba. And at one point, Maharaji was at his temple in Vrindavan in India, northern India. And at the same time, Anandamayi Ma was also at her ashram in Vrindavan. So we had this remarkable several weeks where every morning Ramdas and me and Krishnadas and Raghu and a whole bunch of people would go and be with Anandamayi. And then in the afternoon, we'd go be with Maharaji. And then in the early evening, we'd go be with Ma. And then in the late evening, we'd go home and just sit and talk about, could we really believe how blessed we were to be with these two great saints? And my guru is Maharaji. I've never met anybody like him, but I will say that the only being I've ever met who had a quality of love that was similar to Maharaji's was Anandamayi. She was a remarkable woman. And we're really blessed today to be able to have a conversation with Mangalananda about her, about being with gurus in general. I'm at times a little bit reluctant to talk about gurus because people have different reactions. One of them is I'm jealous because I didn't meet my guru, or how gauche he has a guru. But Mangalananda, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your relationship with your guru and the notion of guru. Uh, you spent a lot more time in India than I did, and actually lived with Ma for many years, I guess, or at least under her guidance there. And you've come back here and are teaching like I am. So we're just going to have a conversation. But to me, the notion of the guru on one hand, and on the other hand, the fact that the Divine Mother is really, in my humble opinion, not sufficiently honored here in the West. That there's a more patriarchal version of the deity here, are two of the topics that I would like to begin to have a conversation about. So, Mangalananda, please.
Two topics very dear to my heart, the divine feminine and the guru. Just real briefly, though, for people who aren't familiar with Anandamayi Ma, many people have heard of her first from the book, the classic spiritual book, Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Many people have read that book, and he met her back in 1936, I think, when she was very young, and he was so impressed with her, he wrote an entire chapter in his book about her. I met her in the 70s. I wrote, this is a little plug, but no, it's good for people who want to know. I wrote a small book about her called A Goddess Among Us. It's available on Amazon. And I was asked by the ashram to write this because there's a lot of larger books about Ma. There's some things about Ma that aren't so accurate. And so the head of our ashram said, please write a book that's just a simple introduction to Ma. So it's basically just her life, some of her teachings, and some of my experiences, my memories of being with her. And it's been translated now into 6 different languages over the years. So it's very popular. So do recommend that. A Goddess Among Us. um, so Ramdev, that's two very big subjects, the Guru and the Divine Feminine. They are interrelated, obviously, but refine your question a little more so I'll know what you want.
Well, so I have holy pictures around. You can see there's Maharaji, and there's Hanuman, and there's Durga, and there's Chinrezi. And every morning, among other things, I get up and I go out and get some flowers, and I bring them here, and I light a candle and I wave incense to all the deities in the room. I say, good morning, glad you're here. And I really notice that depending on God only knows what, I have a very different relationship with these deities. Sometimes I'm feeling that they're out there and I'm offering something. Other times my mind is really empty and I'm not feeling like juicy devotion. It's like spacious, it's almost impersonal in a certain way. And for many years, I felt kind of guilty if I didn't feel I'm in love with you, right? And as my devotion has evolved, hopefully evolved, it seems to be more and more that the guru can only be everything. One of my talks, I remember I called The Beloved Can Only Be Everything. So Maharaji isn't only that guy in the picture up there, but he's you and he's me and he's Donald Trump and he's everything. And one of my lines, I guide people who are approaching death. And I say that when you're dying, Donald Trump is going to be at your bedside. And by that I mean that as long as there's any place in you that immediately is reactive to Donald Trump or to anything, that place that's caught in you is going to be there as we're letting go of physicality and personality. So that I guess what I'm getting at here is that the notion of the guru uh, changes. Ramana Maharshi clearly talks about the outer guru, the inner guru. And I know that a lot of people in this room have very different relationships with the notion of guru, as I mentioned before. And uh, I'm getting old enough now, or Maharaji, maybe you could say, even died long enough ago, that there are fewer and fewer people who are actually with him in his body, and the same could be said about Anandamai. That so that and I don't really see people that are taking their place, right? So I just like to have a conversation about the guru as a method,
Yeah,
as
I got it. That's good. Guru is a very sensitive subject. And in the West, it's something that's frequently balked at. And many gurus came from India in the early 1970s. And some of them, a large number of them, end up having sexual scandals and things that are coming out even now that have discouraged a lot of people with the guru-disciple relationship. I think all this needs to be looked at very honestly. In India, it's a huge part of Indian culture and spirituality. If you think of it, to learn any subject, you need a teacher who is experienced in that subject. When I was first learning Hindi, I was trying to learn it from a book, and within a few pages, I realized I don't know what they're talking about. I need someone who can guide me. Think of playing a musical instrument, how difficult it is. You can't just pick up a violin and go scratch, 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 and eventually get it. You have to have someone who has the skill and the experience to show you how to gradually gain skill in it yourself. So the idea of a guru in anything, guru simply means guru, the one who takes from darkness to light, the one who dispels darkness. So a guru can be anything. If you have a language guru, you can have a love guru, whatever. But the real Satguru is literally God Himself coming to you. That's why at the beginning of this, I said Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara. The Guru is Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. Guru is God Himself. And this is can be a dangerous statement if not properly understood. The Guru is when a soul evolves through countless births and manifestations to a point where they're ready to become truly self-conscious. Not in the sense of that we think of society, I'm self-conscious. S with self with a capital S. When the time has come in our evolution to awaken, then God Himself, herself, because I think of God as feminine, at that point manifests in a particular way exclusively for that person in a most intimate, most personal way possible. God has said, okay, I'm going to wake you up and I'm going to come to you in this form. And it's usually a person, but it doesn't have to be. It's called Guru Tattva. Guru Tattva means the principle of Guru. It's actually a principle within the universe. And when the Guru Tattva comes to a person, it starts to awaken them and then it starts to lead them. And it can come through different people even. Traditionally, you have one guru, but the head of our ashram in India is named Swami Kedarnath, a wonderful yogi, great, wonderful devotee of Ma. I lived with him for 12 years, and he gave me wonderful guidance as a father, as a friend. And one time I was walking with him, and I said, we call him Baba. I said, Baba, I feel I have one guru with two names, Ma and Baba. And he smiled and he said, yes, this Guru Tattva, this principle of the Guru, will come to you many times in your life in many different ways. And you just have to be aware of when it's coming to teach you. So the principle of Guru is the Guru comes to us to awaken us. And it comes at the right time and the right time only. Now, what you're saying about people say, oh, I don't have a Guru, I'm looking for a Guru. Ma said something I think is one of the most important things she said. She said, if a person takes any spiritual practice they feel comfortable with, whether it's the name of God, whether it's a type of yoga, something that they feel is awakening them and evolving them, that they feel compatible, and comfortable with. If they take this practice and faithfully every day apply themselves to it and are devoted to this practice sincerely, she said, anything that else that is needed will come to them automatically on its own by itself.
Thank you, Ma.
And it will. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in many people's lives. So on one level, you don't have to go out to look for a guru. Our job is to make ourselves into a disciple. If we can make ourselves available for a guru, qualified for a guru, the guru has to come. It's a law of the universe. So if we just take a practice and work with it and keep our eyes open, more will come as is needed. I've seen, God, it's in my life so dramatically so many times. So okay, so we have these gurus who ended up, to use the vernacular, bopping a few hippie chicks back in the 70s. This is not permissible, or this is not a good thing. But what I found is I had an experience when I was at Yogaville, which is Swami Satchidananda's ashram in Virginia recently, beautiful, the largest spiritual community in America, I think. They invited me to do a program and some kirtan. And I was very grateful to reconnect with Swami Satchidananda, who was my first teacher. And I have infinite love and gratitude for him. He influences so many people who were stuck in the drug generation and, in our generation. And I had this experience at a samadhi where I realized all these beings, these teachers who have been sent to the West, who come as gurus, they're all conduits. They're all just kind of a pipeline. I mean, I had this experience not as an intellectual understanding, but as an actual experience. They're conduits. And there may be a flaw in the conduit. They may have done something wrong, but they came with a good intention, like Swami Shivananda sent Swami Satchidananda. And I experienced the contents of that conduit. What's flowing to people from that conduit is sacred, is divinity itself, is divine, is perfect. So these wonderful teachers came, which we're so grateful for. And if they had some flaws, we don't condone that, but we don't condemn them as people. We don't say it's all a false thing. The guru whole thing is just a big scam like people have done. The principle of guru disciple is always sacred, and it's always relevant, and it's always necessary. But it comes when we're prepared for it. So our job is to prepare ourselves through our practice rather than looking around shopping for a guru, someone who's the best buy. The one who's supposed to come will come to us. Does that make sense, Ramdev?
It does. Don't you feel that there's a difference between a fully awakened guru and somebody who's a teacher who has a lot of wisdom, who maybe thinks they're a guru, and that it's really tricky to distinguish, right? To me, there's this process of questioning and asking, is this really? In fact, someone once asked Maharaji, how can I tell if somebody is my guru? And he said, do you really feel in your heart of hearts that this person can lead you to complete freedom? And certainly there are many people we meet along the way, a music teacher, a yoga teacher, a meditation teacher, who is very helpful. But that quality of total surrender is reserved for someone who is worthy of that, someone who is not going to cause harm, whose only motivation is love and compassion, right? And so that it's kind of tricky because so many people have surrendered, shall we say, prematurely or unwisely, and gotten hurt along the way. So that the path of devotion, how can I say this? I used to be a scientist. My mind was really very active. So I spent a lot of years doing meditation, quieting down. And really only when I got quiet enough have I begun to appreciate what devotion really is about. That there's some quality of surrender that feels not a duty, but a joy and honor, if you will. And that it happens naturally. It happens, it's just being drawn out of me. Whereas for a long time, I was practicing out of a sense of inadequacy and need and help me, I'm suffering, rather than out of true devotion. I don't know if that makes sense. There's a lot of
Yeah, of course it makes sense. There's a lot of content in all your comments too, so it's hard to uh, precisely respond to anything. Yeah, no, okay, all true. Um, Trying to think of what hit me the most on the in that. Sorry, people don't know I'm suffering from a concussion, so my mind some gets. I totally lost my train of thought from everything you were going to say. What was the breakdown? What you just said? Um,
that that there are people who think there are gurus. I mean,
oh yeah, okay, I've got to go back now. Yeah, it is true. You said there's some people who are wise who can lead you. There's some people who you feel have the ultimate knowledge. There's different degrees of guru. There's the Kula guru, there's the Satguru, and there's the Antara guru. The Kula guru is just a teacher along the way that helps you along the way, that helps you with specific things. And then the Satguru is that one who from eternity your soul has been connected with. And then the Antara guru, that means the inner guru, is the one who the outer guru awakens. Like Ramana Maharshi said, that the outer guru pushes you inward, the inner guru pulls you inward. They work together. The inner guru is the presence of God within us. We have to learn to trust. But, a big but, B-U-T, people
a
push
big
that
but.
stage too, like, yeah, big but in the sense of just B-U-T. People try to push that stage too soon. They say, "Oh, I just rely on the inner guru," and they're just swept away by all the little whims and all the little things. Just saying, "Oh, my inner guru is guiding me." This is a curse of this New Age Western thought. Contacting the inner guru is a very mature state that only comes when you've put aside your own will, when you follow in obedience an external teacher, when you've refined and calmed your mind, as you were talking about. Then you can start to feel the presence of the inner guru. But the outer guru is first necessary. And it is true, Ramdev, what you're saying. You're supposed to test the guru. If you find a teacher you feel can guide you, everyone says you test them thoroughly. You make tests for them. You see if you feel the ability to surrender to their guidance. And you have to really see, watch their life. Like Sri Ramakrishna would tell us people, you watch me day by day and see if I come up to your standard of approval. So there's two things. We have to make ourselves worthy disciples, but we also should test before we surrender to someone. And this idea of surrender, that's actually not an appropriate translation because it has too much the implication of kind of a helpless, I'm no good, I surrender like at the enemy's feet. The word is sharanam. Sharanam means taking refuge. And this surrender, taking refuge, is really the final step, the most important step that all of spiritual life is leading to. That it's the essence, the primal essence, the primal culmination of Bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, where we really finally realize I'm totally giving myself to the divine. And what are we surrendering? We're not surrendering our wealth. Maybe you have to, but we're not just giving somebody money. We're surrendering our ego, which means we're surrendering our sense of separateness. The whole reason we're in this state of confusion and misery and suffering in human existence is because we think we're separate from everything. The ego has come up and just said, okay, I'm just this body, I'm just this mind, and so my consciousness stops here. I'm separate from you, I'm separate from this. And that's a total delusion. But it's the human state of consciousness that we're all in. And so, and somewhere back in the annals of time, we chose this. We chose to be separate for some reason. And we keep clinging to it and we keep thinking that's why we always feel in our human nature, we feel a lack. Something is missing. We're incomplete. And so we're constantly trying to fill this with overactivity, with more possessions. If I get this car, I'll be complete. If I'm with this person, I'll be complete. If I get more money, I'll be complete. but it never works. And then we misuse these things as such as possessions, relationships. We misuse them thinking it's going to do something it can't, rather than what it's really for, because there are uses for these things. So what we're surrendering is this insistence that we are separate and we have to keep adding things to ourselves to be complete. We finally come to the stage of maturity where we can say, "Oh Lord, you are everything, and I'm not separate from you, and I don't want to be separate any longer from you." And we really surrender this desire to be separate, 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 and we want to go back into the unity of life where we experience ourselves moment by moment as one with divine, one with everything. And when we can truly surrender, then it happens. I was telling about Swami Kedarnath, and we call Baba. Baba once said to me, he said, the split second that you surrender totally to Ma and your whole being, that split second you have full illumination. It happens, they're simultaneous. So surrender has to be approached with caution and testing. And it's a matter of, and it can't be forced. It's a matter of slow spiritual maturity and understanding more and seeing more and then desiring more. And then your soul waking up and saying, yes, I want to come to life. And then it happens. Yeah. Ramdev?
So if somebody feels some yearning to find that being in their outer life, uh, do you feel that by asking for that, really praying from your with your heart's desire to meet your guru, that can be effective?
That's the only way. You can't go out and just start Googling who's a good guru and walking around yoga centers looking for gurus. It's a response to your true inner prayer of your heart that the guru comes. And this is a point also. Um, it is possible to have a guru that's no longer embodied. Like I know you and I met Ma and Maharaji, but there are many, many people who take Maharaji as their guru, who take Anandamayi Ma as their guru, who take Paramhansa Yogananda as their guru. And these great beings do not leave us when they leave this world. Uh,
Jesus Christ.
yeah, Jesus Christ, look at this, the Buddha, Muhammad, these great beings leave that portal of name and form. When you say Ram, when you say Krishna, those aren't just historical people. Those are gateways into your own self and into the higher consciousness. And Anandamayi Ma is very definitely one. Maharaji is definitely one of these wonderful portals who are always there to walk through and to connect to. So these great ones are still around. They can be, and a lot of times they'll lead you to someone else. Amma does that a lot. Amma's a guru in her own right. But many times Amma will lead someone inwardly to their own teacher after they become devoted to her. So suddenly someone will come who they feel is they want to follow. So we'll be led if our heart is calling out. God responds to the call of the heart. One thing more about Ma, if it is possible, um, to sit with a saint. And in India, it's more possible because yoga works. I mean, the real yoga, not hatha yoga. I mean, the real science of yoga works. So in every generation in India, there are realized beings. And in my time traveling with Ma in the 70s and then the 12 years lived in India recently, I made a point to seek out the saints and find the ones I thought were luminous, sit at their feet. And you receive something from these great beings that you can't receive even through years of meditation or study or anything by just sitting with them, not asking the questions, just sitting in their presence. Because they're in that presence that we're looking for. They've broken that veil and they're experiencing the divine moment by moment. They're in that unitive state. And when you sit with them, it begins to awaken that in you, and you get a life that you wouldn't otherwise get. It's wonderful. So Anandamayi Ma was in this state literally from birth. Many masters, even like Christ, the Buddha, they go through a period where they practice discipline, and then they have this realization. Ma literally opened her eyes, and that was it. And from the first breath to the last breath, she was never out of that divine union. I know many yogis who have kind of examined her as they were watching her, and they say, I can't believe it. There's never a split second where she's not just in union, she was a manifestation of divine consciousness. She was a manifestation of the Divine Mother. And so it was amazing to sit with her. I found that when she walked into a room and I tried to keep my eyes just resting on her at every moment, by my eyes just touching her form, my own being would start to wake up in ways I couldn't even imagine. I didn't know there were areas in there I didn't know existed. Oh, just by looking at Ma. And if she looked at you, oh boy, it was she would look right past everything, right at your soul, your eternal soul. And just her looking at us like, oh, here. It was just begin to wake you up. So being with these wonderful beings is a huge transformational process. It can be very uncomfortable too. Ma said, you can't keep snakes in your bosom, they'll bite you from inside. So everything can be flushed out by being near Ma. And it was sometimes very uncomfortable, but very wonderful. So if we can ever have a chance to sit with people who are very evolved or people who really have crossed that portal into the divine, it's a huge blessing. And Ma, there's so many stories about Ma just waking people up just by her presence. And because she was literally uneducated. She went to 2 years of school. She didn't write books. She didn't give public talks. She answered questions. But she influenced millions of people just by her constant moving and, from people's hearts and being with people.
You
So,
have a couple of favorite stories about her?
oh, I can't, so many. Uh, she for 50 years, from 1932 to 1982, when she left her body, she traveled incessantly. And people would ask her, Ma, why do you move around so much? And she would joke and say, I'm just a restless little girl. Sometimes she would say that. Sometimes she would say, you see me moving. She said, I experience no sense of movement. In other words, she was just unmoving
Right.
consciousness. And also she would say, I'm just walking through my garden, looking at my flowers. All of us are her flowers. But she was just pulled by people's hearts. So like one time she was in Varanasi, and okay, one time she was in Varanasi and she was giving a talk, or it's just something was happening, satsang was happening, and suddenly she just got up and walked out of the room, and a couple of close attendants, followed her. Obviously, she walked to the railway station, which is nearby, and she just stood there for a moment, and she jumped on this particular train. They all jumped on with her. And after a short time, she arrived at some station where it wasn't even a stop, and she jumped off. They jumped off with her. She walked through the black of the night. She knew where she was going. She walked through this small little village and into this dharmashala. Dharmashala is a pilgrim house where people rest. And up, like she knew where she was going, into this room, opened the door, and there was a lady there sitting on the bed weeping. And she said, don't cry, I'm here, I'm here. The lady's name was Maharatan. I actually know her granddaughter who told me this story. And she says, I'm here, I'm here. And she hugged her and she says, oh, Ma, you're here, you're here. And this lady, Maharatan, excuse me, was a very devoted devotee of Ma. And she'd heard that Ma was going to be in this particular village that night. So a great difficulty. She was old and difficulties traveling. She traveled to this village, looked around, and Ma was not there. She didn't know where Ma was, and she was longing to be with Ma. So she just sat on a bed and cried. And quite a ways away, Ma heard that in her heart and came all the way just to walk in. Things like that. There was a sadhu in Jagannath Puri whose guru was very old and very ill, and he'd been longing for darshan of Ma. He said, oh, I've always wanted to have darshan of Ma before I leave, and he was ready to leave his body. And Ma changed her plans. Ma, of course, didn't know she received no word externally, and she was scheduled to go somewhere else, and suddenly she just changed and went to Jagannath Puri and walked in and said, Baba, here I am. And the guy looked at her and said, Ma, I died. So I love stories where Ma responds to the inner promptings of our heart. And I had my own experience with that as you were saying, Ramdev, that the Ma would give darshan sometimes in the evening, and we would wait all day in the ashram just to see her. And sometimes the word would come out, oh, a special visitor has come, or Ma is not indisposed and she can't come out for darshan. That happened a few times in the Brindavan ashram, I remember. And I remember a few of us, Ram Alexander. Do you know Ram Alexander, American?
Yeah.
Yeah, Ram and I and a few people would just go beneath her window. It was a second story window. We would go beneath her window like Romeo and Juliet, and we wouldn't make any noise. We would just quietly say, Ma, 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 oh, Ma, Ma, in our hearts, mentally, without fail, every time Ma would come out and see who's calling her. If she pronounced us and bless us, go back in, without fail. And so many times you could just speak to Ma in your heart and she would respond. One of my friends said he was sitting there at a Samyan Sapta. That's one of these retreats that Ma would always be at. And we would just sit and just look at Ma all day. It was so wonderful. At one point, he really had to go to the bathroom, but he in his mind said, Ma, I don't want to take my eyes off you, but I really have to go to the bathroom. And Ma was looking at it, and Ma just went, go on. So I just love, we when we pray, we want to know that God hears us. And we don't want to just be speaking into the air. Now, we know God does, but it's really wonderful when we get the confirmations that God hears us. And Ma said so many wonderful things. She said, anybody reaching out to the divine in any language, in any country, in any age, she said, their cries reach this heart like the waves crashing against the shore. So it's nice when you understand that and feel Ma's response.
Could you say anything about Guru's grace?
Yeah. This is also the essence of Bhakti Yoga. Kripa. Kripa means grace. And it is an established fact witnessed by every saint and witnessed by any real spiritual aspirant that grace is everything. And I've seen this in my life. We can't even conceive of the concept of spiritual life until you have grace. Until the fact that we're all here interested in this, it means we've been touched by the grace of God. And we can't even begin to understand what it means to have spiritual life, even what to speak of longing to do it, what to speak of doing it, unless we've first been touched by the grace of God. And the Guru's grace is this wonderful grace coming to us specifically through a particular person, or like I say, photo or book or something that awakens us. Like Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. That was a huge awakener for me in the 70s to many people. So that was Guru Tattva. But we can only start our spiritual life through grace. We can only continue it through grace. And everyone says the final plunge into the divine, into unity of consciousness, can only come through grace. Like I say, I met many saints in India, and just a few years ago, I don't know, maybe in 2012, that's kind of a few years ago now, I met a saint outside of Pune in Maharashtra. Some friends took me to see him. Wonderful, just like a childlike saint. He'd been living there with his guru since he was a boy. And he had this long white jata and very refined face. And he just spoke with such innocence and godlessness. I believed every word he said. And I asked him, I said, Swamiji, what's your sadhana? And his face just beamed and he said, these days, I have no sadhana. I just live in the being of God. I believed him. And then he was talking and he said, any self-effort we make, which is necessary, will take us to a certain plateau. And as he was speaking, he was like looking in the divine. He was seeing this as he spoke. He said, it will take you to a certain plateau. And from there, you'll see before you an infinite sea of light and consciousness. And he said, and it's by invitation only. Then he said, he will call you. He will call you. Call to him. He will call you. So within this concept of what is self-will, what is effort, and what is grace, people say it's all grace. This so-called Neo-Vedanta movement in the West now, where you already realize you don't have to do any sadhana, you don't have to make any effort, you already are that. That's mistaking a final truth for a conditional truth. We are that, but it's not diagnosing the illness right. We are separated by this inner veil of ignorance. So, what is the relation between grace and self-effort? And Ma gave a beautiful example once. She was sitting there, and someone had given her a flower. So she was holding this flower, kind of playing with it. And a man in front of her said, Ma, why do I have to do sadhana if it's all grace? It's all grace. Why do I have to do anything? What is grace and what is self-effort? And Ma just looked at him and she handed him the flower. She didn't say anything. She just handed him the flower. He said, Oh, thank you, Ma. And he took it. And she said, There's your answer. This flower is grace. I gave it to you. And if you'd gone like that and didn't take it, you wouldn't have it. But you reached out and you took it. And that's the connection between grace and self-effort. Grace, Ma said, grace is falling like a waterfall at all times on all living beings. But she said, if your vessel is upside down under a waterfall, the inside will still be dry.
Mhm.
So she says, sadhana is learning to turn our vessels right side up, so then we can capture and catch that grace. Sri Ramakrishna used the example, it's like flowing as a breeze, but you have to learn to put your sail up to catch it.
Mhm.
So sadhana is absolutely necessary, but it's all just so we purify ourselves so we can receive the grace of God, receive the grace of the Guru. And the Guru's grace is God's grace, but it's specifically channeled through a particular being or person to come to us, to awaken us. But we have to be qualified to receive it. Yogananda, he was a great master, and his disciples once said to him, they said, Master, you can just touch us and put us in samadhi. Why don't you do that? And he laughed and he said, you would explode like a light bulb with 50,000 volts put through it. He said, you have to slowly develop your capacity to retain this consciousness, not just to attain it, but to retain it once you have it. So that's where the self-effort comes in and the maturity. Make sense?
It does. And you use that analogy of the upside down bowl and you turn it over to receive the grace. The feeling I had when I first came to Maharaji was my bowl was right side up, but it was a sieve.
Yeah, holes in it, yeah.
And that I was dying of thirst, and he was this ocean of nectar. And he kept pouring the nectar into me, and it just kept falling out the bottom because of my assumed inadequacy and my doubt and my fear. And gradually, devotion changed from I'm inadequate. I began to uh, believe him when he saw wholeness in me,
Mm.
right? I mean, in some way, that was the function of the guru, that he kept loving the wholeness in me, even though I kept believing the separateness in me. And so then devotion changed to, yeah, I can begin to accept grace, and that devotion was at least as much about receiving as about doing practice. And then tantric devotion, which maybe we could explore a little bit, where
But wait. Because you have so much content in your questions. I'm thinking, but hold that thought, because I want to go tantric devotion is a whole different subject. Two things. The guru seeing in us what's real, and let's explain what are the holes in this sieve? What are the holes that everything's leaking out of? Let's talk about those 2 points. Super good points. First of all, that Ramdev, that's so beautiful. I remember you at our Ramati Satsang, you talked about that, how Maharaji saw you as something more than you thought yourself. And his very seeing of that, probably, that is so beautiful and that's so true. Like I was saying, when Ma looked at us, she just saw the self. And so we finally, that's the first awakening to become that. So God or the Guru, however you think of it, sees us as part of himself. In the Gita, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives a beautiful example of the soul. He says, an eternal part of me, speaking as God, takes on a body, a mind, and ego and becomes the jiva, the individual soul. So we are an eternal part of God, and God only sees us as an eternal part of himself, herself. A wonderful story I heard directly from the person who it happened to, excuse me. I had a beautiful friend who has since passed away. He was a Swiss nationalist who came to India in the 1950s and took initiation from a direct disciple of Yogananda and took sannyas and wandered around India. He was kind of my ideal. His name is Swami Gyanananda. He lived in Dehradun. When I knew him, he was very old and he was just a wonderful yogi. He was a Westerner who really made it. And he spent a lot of time with Anandamayi Ma also and loved her very much. And he told me a wonderful story. And he said, we all experienced, and now this is me speaking, we all experienced Ma devotees that when we were with Ma, we always felt this soul familiarity. Soul as an S-O-U-L. Like our soul knew Ma. First time I saw Ma, I realized I've always known her and I'll always know her. This recognition of her as the eternal mother of our soul. And Ma always saw us as a part of her. So one time Gyanananda was sitting with Ma and he was feeling this feeling of, oh my God, Ma just knows me inside and out. How is that? So he asked Ma, he said, Ma, how do you know me so well? You know me better than I know myself. How do you know me? And show me what he said. Ma replied in Hindi. She said, Koi dusra nahi hai. Koi dusra nahi hai. That means there's not another. Dusra is a second, another. There's not another. So think I meditate on that. So she was looking at him and not seeing someone separate from herself. That's what's beautiful about the concept of God as Shiva. Shiva sits in samadhi and everyone comes to him. You see in the icons the ghosts, the scorpions, the wild dogs, they all come and sit with him because he doesn't reject anyone because he sees everyone as a part of himself. So if we realize that the Guru and God see us already as unity, it means all this separateness, all this conception of I'm separate, I'm terrible, I'm this, I'm that, is all on our side. So the good news of that is hopefully we can just stop it. We can just, hey, let's drop this, which is not an intellectual process. It begins with an intellectual understanding. It begins with an intellectual recognition of the fact, but it culminates in the experience of it. And so when the Guru looks at us and sees us as more than we think we are, that's true. That's what starts the process of understanding we are more than that. The other thing is, okay, you said you felt that you were a sieve. That is so true that we have to not only turn our bucket, our bowl right side up to catch the grace, we have to keep it from flowing out. What makes it flow out? And this is kind of universally recognized by the saints too. What makes it flow out are discursive desires, discursive thinking, discursive understanding. So one thing about spiritual life is learning to unify our desires. Ma said many times that the self, God, however we think of this, appears only when we long for God with all our soul. There's a very standard story people would tell in India. I think even the Buddha might have talked about it, where the disciple said, when will I see God? And the Guru took him to a river and said, here's your answer, pushed him underwater and held him down for a long time. And he was struggling. Finally, he let him up and he said, what were you thinking? He said, all I was thinking was, I got a breather, I'm going to die. He said, when you have that much longing for God, you'll see God immediately. So spiritual life is a slow process of, first of all, just wanting something besides this world, which only comes through grace. Once we're touched by grace, we start realizing there's something beyond just eating, sleeping, and procreating, making money, spending money, and looking for a mate. There's something far beyond that. First step of grace. And then it's slowly seeing the need for spiritual life, practicing it, and then slowly experiencing the effects of it, the wonderful effects of it, the efficacy of it, the wonderful wholeness it begins to bring, the peace it begins to bring, so that we devote ourselves more and more to the time. And slowly, like someone has said, A great person in this world, be it man or woman, is someone who is born with few desires and they concentrated on one line of approach. So then it's beginning to see all our different desires. I want this, I want that. And it's all based on this misconception that what this thing we desire will make us more complete. Never works. So we begin to consciously see this isn't for me, this isn't for me. It's called vairagya. That means a slow detachment from, and it doesn't mean you have to run off to a cave and shave your head, and do all this. It means you begin to sensibly see that external things have their place, but they don't fulfill that emptiness. And so we begin to concentrate more on our spiritual life, and slowly all these desires get put into this one river of desire for God. I don't really need that. I can pull that little desire out. I don't really need this. And so we have prana. Prana is our life force, which goes through our body and our mind. And we only have so much prana. And when it's constantly leaking out through little desires, we can't concentrate on anything. So when these desires become slowly, slowly merged into this one great desire, then we can really concentrate, then we can really apply our lives, and then we can really surrender. Surrender only comes through a totally unified mind, calm mind. So yeah, so we all have our mind's a sieve, you pour into it, it all goes out through all these little stupid desires. So spiritual life is starting to close up those holes in the sieve and make it a bowl instead of a sieve. Yeah. Yeah. Does that make sense, Ramdev? Kind
It
of,
does. It
and keep
does.
keep 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 your thought of what you were talking because I can only go a couple things at a time. So what was your next thought?
Well, I'd like to go back to what you just said about Viagra. I mean, not Viagra, but that's
Vairagya.
right.
Vairagya and Vairagya are two different things.
Right. You were essentially a renunciate. Now you're married. Your life has radically changed from living in an incredibly simple way in India to working, having a home in Marin County, having a job, having a wife. Could you say something about how that has changed your relationship with grace and with the divine?
Good question and a very big subject. Yeah, for people who don't know me, I was a monk for 40 years. I actually when I was 18, I met Swami Satchidananda, and when I got out of school, I started living in one of his ashrams. Then I had this experience with Ma, went and stayed with Ma as a brahmachari, that means a celibate sadhu. And then when I came back, I actually lived in an Eastern Orthodox Christian monastery for a couple of years, which had a lot of benefit to it. And I lived in different very austere ashrams. And then I lived 12 years in India in utter simplicity and renunciation. And so yeah, so now it's interesting. I can speak to people kind of about both sides of the coin. Okay, so for 40 years, I was a monk. The last 10 years, I was a sannyasi. I was given a very simple sannyas by Swami Kedarnath, which he later, and then with his permission, my sannyas guru's permission, I asked him if I could step down and marry this person and live as a householder. And he um, thought about it, and he was a very strict sannyasi himself, but he knew me and he loved me and he knew what I needed. So he said, "Yeah, we can do this." He said, "Just keep up your practice, keep up your bhav, that's your inner feeling." And I had Gloria, my wife, to come to India one more time, and we sat with him together, and he blessed us with a practice to do, and he kind of connected her with Ma. She has another guru, Ignatishwaran. And so we proceeded. Now, what brought that about? One thing is, again, by grace, I had this awakening when I was just a teenager. I went to India when I was 19 to meet Ma. And on my 20th birthday, actually on the day of my birth, she agreed to give me Diksha. Very interesting. So I was 19 and 20, those years I was traveling with her. And I always wanted to live for God. But then when I entered into the ashram or to the monastery and the big doors swung shut behind me with a clang, I realized lifelong celibacy is also a part of this. Wow, that kind of sucks. I was never real, real big on the lifelong celibacy, but God is my witness. I really gave it my best try for 40 years. And brahmacharya, this celibacy, I can tell you from experience now, it's has a great efficacy. It is true, especially for a man. When you control your virya, which manifests externally as semen, but it's like your inner power, and you're able to transmute it through yogic processes into a higher energy. In fact, Ram Dass's book was originally called From Bendu to Ojas, which is that very thing. Um, it's very helpful. Now, it's also my experience, both in my own life and through observation of, I moved with sadhus and monks for 40 years. That's my company I kept. It's virtually impossible. I mean, there's like one in a million who really does it completely, who really transmutes all that energy. Otherwise, you're just burning all the time. Um, and that has its own problems. And that's where you get a lot of these weird things, the priests molesting the crawboys and the gurus running after the hippie chicks. And it's unsublimated sexual energy. So I was very happy with the monastic lifestyle for all those years. I loved the life of sadhana. I loved the dedication of it. I loved the freedom of it. I mean, you're never idle. When you were living in ashram, you work your butt off. It's not like you have an easy life. It's a tough life. It's a very tough life. But I felt fulfilled in it for many years. And then when the ashram started sending me to tour and do these classes and kirtans and things, and I was seeing couples, and I always had a very strong sex drive, and I was always very attracted to women. But I just saw happy couples and things, and I think what it was is, karmically we have our prarabdha karma, which is the karma that we have to reap in this life, and we have freedom within that of how we respond to things. But there are certain things that have to happen. So I was reaching a point in my karma where I was supposed to be with Gloria, with this woman, and so that's not going to happen unless I start to feel an unrest in my current way of life. So I was still, I was still keeping all the observances and things, but I was feeling a restlessness and that I'd missed something in life. And I'd lived such a severe life. And I was living in this one life. My parents were very kind, very spiritual people. They were very good to me. But then I lived for many years in this one ashram where it was so harsh. You never got even a kind word or a word of encouragement. In fact, it's a long story, but the guy who ran it was a kook and he hated me. And so I spent a lot of years with persecution. I mean, I was really treated terribly. And I just bore with it and did the best I could. And finally, I got a chance to go back to India. But I was sent back by Ma's main Swami, and I was so relieved. My 12 years in India were absolutely wonderful, difficult, but very, very wonderful and healing. But I had a lot of psychological scars that can only be healed, frankly, by love. And so this time came, and in my travels, I met this woman. We felt like old friends. Every time I saw her, we would come back every year, and she would show me around, and we were like buddies. We were best buddies. And then she came a couple times to India to see the school. Second time she came, we realized, hey, we're like totally in love. Like, what the hell do we do with this? And so we just kept in touch over almost a year. And what do we do with this? And I was in a place, I was 60 years old. I was in a place from where you're in a position from how you've lived your entire life. I was a respected Swami in this order. I was in a position where my whole life had led me up to that. And I had to make a choice to come back to America and with no job training and no experience in society to integrate, never been with a woman. I mean, in a sense, had a relationship, entering totally new realms. So I had to do a lot of soul searching, but I felt it was worth it. And we did it. And I did it. The important thing is I wasn't just a sneaky Swami. I openly approached my sannyas guru. I said, "Can I do this? Do I have your blessing?" He gave me his blessing. He took me from the state of sannyas. He blessed me and Gloria to be together. He said, "You were together, you were alone before, now you proceed together." And we our life is based on our spiritual compatibility. She's a very sincere sadhika. She never misses meditation. She loves her guru. And she also now loves Ma too. And in fact, that's how we met. She said her guru met Ma and loved Ma. And a week before I came, she went to this bookstore and got a picture of Ma and put it on her altar. She said, I need more divine feminine. Then she saw this picture. Here's the Swami of Anandamayi Ma coming to do a kirtan. So she thought, oh, should I go? Maybe not. Then she went because of Ma. So this is kind of a long story, but I'll try to streamline it. So here I am, 60 years old, never had a relationship, never knew what it was like to live with a woman. I had to develop levels of sensitivity I didn't know existed. I'd been a strange bachelor living with rough sadhus. You hit each other side of the head, whap. Learning to sensitize myself to these beautiful divine images of divine femininity, known as women, which I had no idea what to do. But anyway, I'm still a husband in training. We've been together 11 years now. We had 11th anniversary. And I can honestly say it's the medicine I needed. Totally. I mean, I'm not saying every sannyasi should leave by any means. Sannyasa is an incredibly exalted, incredibly beautiful, and dedicated state of soul. And to be totally dedicated to God is wonderful. But we all need what we need. I had to admit that I had needs, not just sexual. I mean, needs for love, needs for companionship. Um, so when I became honest with myself, and I, in all humility, entered into this relationship, I have learned so much, and my heart is opened so much. And Gloria has been she's also an embodiment of Guru Tattva. She's my teacher of love and relationship. And we've both grown a lot from being together. And my sadhana is not just a day. I mean, I have a job, but I get up at 4:30. I do almost 3 hours of sadhana in the morning. And then we meditate together at night. Gloria also meditates. She has a different schedule, but she meditates hours a day. And we live in a temple here, as you can see. And our life is spiritually based, but we also have wonderful, loving relationship. And I'll be very frank about this, about brahmacharya. Especially the last few years, I was tormented by sexual thoughts because I had a desire for it and I couldn't express it and I couldn't transmute it. And I was just like in a state. Now, when I found that sexuality is in its proper place, but in a dedicated relationship with someone you love, and we were legally married, we've also had the spiritual, beautiful ceremonies, both Sikh and Hindu. And when sexuality is expressed with a wonderful partner, then it's in its place. And it doesn't leak over in the rest of your life. I can live the rest of my life. I can be honest. I can have women as friends. I can have women as, students where there's no need in me to have anything that has to leak from other parts of my life. So I have found that everything is in its correct place now, and it's been very healing. And I've kind of seen both sides of the spectrum of being a sadhu and a grihasta. And they're both very good. And I feel more honest and more grounded now. And I think my sadhana is actually stronger and more complete because it doesn't have these strange unmet
Got it.
needs. This is a very honest, I'm kind of burying my soul here.
That's probably a question you didn't expect.
Not correct.
So when Ramdas had his stroke, he for a while was really angry at Maharaji. He said, "Why are you doing this to me?" And here was this guy, one of the most articulate spiritual teachers in America, and he couldn't speak anymore. And it took him a while. Now, you didn't have a stroke, but a week ago, or however long it was, you got hit in the head by a 4x4 doing construction. And you almost weren't able to come here today. You have a concussion. Uh, Ramdas eventually got to the place where he felt that he had a stroke of grace. And I was wondering if you feel that getting hit in the head by a 4x4 is Guru's grace.
Absolutely. This is our approach to sadhana that we were led in by Swami Kedarnath, and because we studied Ma's words, and in Ma's ashrams we take Ma's words, and he was a great. I'm talking about now our Baba Swami Kedarnath, disciple of Ma. he took all of Ma's words that we all have, and because we have many different books and transcripts and different things, he consolidated them into several books, mostly in Hindi. We spent a lot of time translating it. And we really think, what is Ma saying? How is she guiding us? And the main thing is everything that comes to you at any moment is God Himself, herself, is grace, is God's manifestation. People would come to Ma and say, Ma, I just lost my son. She would console them, but she would say, God has come to you as loss. They would come and say, I just won the lottery, I just got the job I won. Oh, God has come to you as attainment. But she uncompromisingly said, everything that comes to us is God Himself. So I consciously thought this when I was bopped in the head. I was lying on the ground, knocked over. When I thought about it later, I thought, okay, well, Ma has come to me as this bop on the head, which was very unpleasant. I spent the last week in bed. Um, and then Gloria got me into this incredible osteopath. I'll name her Maud Nerman in Novato, who specializes only in traumatic brain injuries. And her treatments are amazing. And so after the treatment, I was feeling so much better. And I thought, Ma has come to me as this treatment. She's come to me as the concussion. She's come to me as the healing. It's all Ma. And I'm trying to learn from whatever Ma brings. And one thing I think I was just pushing myself too hard through my life. I have three jobs. I teach classes online at night. I do kirtan and satsangs on the weekend. My day begins at 4:30. It ends like 11:30. It's like, hey, Ma saying, bam, slow down a little bit. And also especially every traumatic thing, a lot of karma is burnt off. Like Ma would take a huge amount of something that's supposed to be coming to me and it may even kill me, and she'll concentrate it and just wham, hit you in one in one big wallop, and hopefully it's then burnt off. So this is her grace also. Yeah. So I didn't get mad at Ma. I just said, okay.
Okay. Couple of really quick ones, and then let's leave some time for Q&A.
Okay.
So what you're saying about everything is Ma, everything is God, that's true also collectively, like Donald Trump and environmental degradation.
That is a really hard question because we have this strange thing we call free will, where we do have, I mean, everything is God, everything is Ma, everything is karma and grace. Same time, there's a certain amount of flexibility where the human will can move it one way or the other. So I will, how do you answer that? Of course, who am I to answer that? But my ponderings on this also, because I pondered it also, I don't think it's Ma's will that the earth is developed. I don't think it's Ma's will that American democracy gets turned into a dictatorship. But there is a bigger picture in which all these things have their place. Darkness and light have to keep alternating back and forth because that's what this diversity is built on. So I think will has a play in that somewhere, and a misuse of will or a good use of will. Does that make sense? Because who can answer
It
that?
it does. It's a very difficult question, but uh, yeah, we can leave it at that. And then, final question: the difference between conventional devotion and tantric devotion.
Ah, that's a really interesting question. Okay, give me your thoughts first.
Well, conventional devotion is I'm in love with Maharaji, I'm in love with Christ, I'm in love with the Dharma. There's me, and there's something outside there that's greater than me. I can love, I can receive love. I'm a devotee, and then, but there's probably still some sense of inadequacy that I'm needing something potentially. Whereas in tantric love, uh, love has transformed, devotion has transformed into a sense of uh, I'm in love with God, but I am God. Maybe the more clear way of talking about it is saying a mantra from the standpoint of a conventional devotion. Saying a mantra is I'm saying Ram Ram Ram, for instance, and it's a vehicle to love Ram. I'm feeling love from Ram. I'm feeling love for Ram. But when we get to the tantric stage and we say Ram, we realize that the sound is the complete manifestation of Ram. Each time I say Ram, it manifests the complete deity, and that I am that, and the sound is that, and that Ram is that, and the distractive thought is that.
Yeah, that's 100%. This we could do a whole talk on just on this. This word tantra also has really been misused worse than the word yoga. Where they take a little bit of one little thing about asanas and call it yoga. Yoga is the science of self-realization. Tantra is in fact, recently a neo-tantric teacher, a friend of mine, Caroline Carrington, asked me to do a podcast with her on what is classical tantra, distinctive from what they call tantra now. Tantra is the worship of the invocation of the Divine Mother through very esoteric practices such as mantra, yantra, kriyas. It's not even it's never public. It's always taught to qualified people. It's very inner. Sexuality is like a I wouldn't say not part of it, but not generally part of it. It's very subtle movements and things. Okay, let's try to streamline this because we don't have time. That is so true what you said, Ramdev. And I love both in our devotional life. We will go back and forth between both. Like I find these people, frankly, Buddhists who I love the Buddhist teaching. I love Buddhists, but for me, I'm a devotee. It's my heart. So that's too dry. Vedantists I find too dry when they say I am the self, all is the self. I love to worship God. I love the external thing. Gloria and I go regularly to the Russian Orthodox Church here, who they and I believe the doctrines about Christ. I don't believe the doctrines about one life and eternal damnation, all this stuff, which I think is a misunderstanding and misinterpretation of the words of Christ. But I love their devotion, and I love just feeling the presence of God and praying to God. So I believe the self is everything. I believe that God is inside, but God is also is outside in the sense that Ishwara, when Brahman manifests creation, he then, Brahman has no attributes, only consciousness. But then Brahman manifests as Ishwara, the personal God, in all these forms and things, and we can relate to him, we can love him, her. So I believe absolutely in worshiping God externally, praying to God, as you say. But it is true. It's a matter of maturity. It does devolve into a tantric perception. Let me give you my experience, which totally is 100% advised with yours. Um, Anandamayi Ma often gave initiation and instruction in stages. She would add something sometimes years later and say, keep doing this, but add this. In my life, she left her body while I was still very immature, but she spoke through her great disciples, Swami Bhaskarnanda, Swami Kedarnath, these people, ones I was living with. So she later gave me instruction. She gave me a Nam mantra, a Devi, a name of the Divine Mother, which we all thought was her name. I thought of it as her name, which I was practicing for many years. And then she would sometimes give some of her sadhus who were not Brahmins the initiation in the Gayatri mantra, saying that would be good for them. So then many years later, Ma left her body. In 2003, I think, Ma's main Swami, Swami Bhaskarnanda, was going to come visit. And he said, be prepared, you should be initiated in the Gayatri mantra and add that to your sadhana. So went through the whole Upanayana, which is a beautiful ritual with a Brahmin priest and a fire ritual and everything. You should have your head shaved. That's the last time I cut my hair. Um, and I was given the sacred thread, which you wear, from one side to side. And I was initiated in the Gayatri mantra, and it was a huge help in my sadhana. It was something later found I had some scar from a past life also. So then later, when I was initiated into this very informal sannyas, Swami Kedarnath said, this is very important. I want to pass on something to you from Ma herself. Ma gave you a Nam mantra. I want to give you the Bija mantra, the internal mantra, the sound formula that's within that mantra. So he says, when you sit in meditation, say this mantra, and then when you're moving around through the day, say the form that Ma gave you. So I started patching them Bij mantra. The Bij mantra is a very powerful seed. Bij means seed, and it's like you have the Nam mantras like Ram, Ram, Shri Ram, Jai Ram, or, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namo Narayanaya. These beautiful Sanskrit mantras, the beads are very small, like Hrim, Klim, Shrim, very short, very powerful. And you don't get them from books. You can only get them, they have to be jump started. They have to be activated by a teacher. So he gave me the beads of this mantra and I started saying it. And I had the same experience that when I'm saying the Nam mantra, I'm thinking not of Ma as separate from me, but just I'm breathing her in and out. She's there all around me. When I say the beach mantra, I can't think of it external because the mind starts to vibrate with that sound of the beach mantra, and you realize the mind has become the Devi. My mind itself has become a form of the divine mother through the vibration of the sound. The beach mantra, it doesn't have to be a beach mantra. It can be anything practiced with this level of, you could say, call it tantric maturity. You could be Ram, of course. As you're experiencing, as we're both experiencing, the mind itself becomes the deity. The mind itself becomes the very form of the deity through the vibration of the mantra. Mantra is such an incredible technique and subject to itself. We never got to the divine feminine, which is one of my strongest passions, that the divine feminine needs to be more represented in society. Women need to come into their own. The divine mother needs to be honored more. This is something Ma stressed a lot, and she brought a whole change in people's consciousness through this. But anyway, so where are we time-wise, Ramdev?
Well, we have about 13 minutes. Let's see if anyone has some questions that they would like to ask Mangalananda.
Mangalananda, if you're willing, I would love to hear a little more about the topic you just mentioned, and especially about the divine feminine in society. I know we could probably spend the next hour talking about it, but would love to hear your thoughts and Ma's teachings in that way.
Yeah, Ma said many times, she said, the time has come in society where the women need to take their place and also not just row the oars, but also to have the rudder. That the time is coming. We are in a transformational stage, I think, in the history of the world. There is a step up to the next level of human consciousness that's happening, the next plateau of evolutionary process of the human race. Many saints have said this. And that's why it's so tumultuous at this time. Sometimes it has to come through tumult and through chaos. Um, and a very important thing is the emergence of women's roles. Because, I mean, come on, guys, we all have to admit, women have been treated horrifically throughout history by men. We won't go into that because it's too horrible a subject. There have been, like in South India, there are matriarchal sects within Hinduism where the women are the leaders. It's wonderful. But the fact that the divine incarnated as divine, as the fact that the divine took incarnation as a woman, Anandamayi Ma, has an historical effect on the consciousness of the human race also. Um, and Ma did many things. See, I say Ma did things. Ma never like did anything. She never had a plan to do this. She was like in this perfect state of divinity, and she was the essence of spontaneity. Things just happened and unfolded around her according to the divine will. And she made a huge difference in how women were treated in India. She kept saying to people, include your wives, your sisters, your mothers in your practice. She made a whole thing for women. She established a women's school. I mean, she didn't establish it all. Like I said, it all happened spontaneously around her. There's this Kanya Peeth in Varanasi, which is still a very well-run school for training girls. Um, and she said women need to have this concept of the Divine Mother as they are that is the archetype of who they are. Every woman, Ma is saying this, every woman is a manifestation of the Divine Mother. And the more women have that archetype of the divine feminine, the more they will be empowered in the right way. And it's not a political way. And obviously, women's rights, these political things are a part of it without doubt, because society also needs to externally adopt to it. But really, we're talking about a consciousness change, because a consciousness change is the only way anything will really change in society and the world. It's such a vast subject. How Ma did this, what the things were. She We talked about the sacred thread ceremony. Um, for centuries now, that's only been given to boys, higher Brahmins and higher Kshatriyas, higher caste boys. It's kind of the coming of age thing, like bar mitzvah or confirmation or whatever, um, for 12-year-olds to receive the Gayatri Mantra and go through the Upanayana. And through a beautiful play, because Ma's things usually came through some kind of play. She just suddenly, it happened spontaneously, lovingly, and it all evolved into this wonderful thing. Through this beautiful play, which just started when someone brought Ma this long gold necklace, and she said, "Oh, look, it's the length of a janayu, a sacred thread." And she put it on like that. And she had Brahmins come in and recite Gayatri Mantra around her. She went into samadhi. And through this play, several things happened. Eventually, it came that it was discovered that, of course, in ancient times, not ancient times, I think it was before British and Mughal emperor influence in India, of course, girls and boys were both equally given the Gayatri Mantra at that time, at 12 years old. And so through working with the pundits of Varanasi, they said, whatever Ma says is Veda. She got it reinstated in many places in India that girls now also receive Gayatri Mantra. And in her ashram, she had many girls uh, imbued with the sacred thread and Gayatri Mantra. And we have women pujaris who do the pujas in Ma's ashrams. So she made a start and is still going where things are externally opening up to women more. Um, but I think mainly it's a change of consciousness which comes about through an acknowledgement of the Divine Mother. And in every tradition, you do have the Divine Mother. You have the Holy Virgin Mary in the Christianity. You can see up there we have our icon of the Virgin Mary. um, you have Radha in the Krishna lineage. You have Tara in the Buddhist sense. You always have the Divine Mother as the one who leads, who gives you the real spiritual gifts. But it needs to be emphasized even more, especially in the West. In India, it's common knowledge, and everyone knows that. But in the West, it's slowly unveiling more. And like Ramdev is saying, this patriarchal side of, the stern father image of God. God is father and mother. We say, Tvameva mata cha tvameva pita. You are mother, father. So that's a very short answer, but does that help anything?
Certainly, yes.
Any other questions? Surely somebody must
Shivaya.
have some question.
Radha?
Yes, nice to see you, Mangalananda ji. I'm studying a lot of Upanishads lately with some Vedanta teachers, and my main teacher makes it sound more like Bhakti and these other practices are more preparation for Vedanta, and like you eventually almost have to go into that, like you said, that drier form of study. And I'm very bhakti by nature. Do you feel like bhakti can be your complete path to enlightenment, or is it a purification to then be more open to studying?
So it's a very good question. Um, Answer is a wholehearted yes. I personally, I know through my own experience, through the words of the saints, the words of Ma, the bhakti is in itself a complete path that will lead to the exact same goal as Vedanta, as any of these other paths. And Ma stressed that so many times. Sri Ramakrishna stressed it, that each path is complete in itself. But this is also another important point. Ma said they're all interrelated. And
Mm.
there'll be an emphasis on one, but they all have to draw. She said bhakti is not just singing and dancing and eating prasad. You also have to draw on Raja Yoga through meditation. You have to draw on Vedanta to know that, yes, I am the self, but this self is a worshiping God. They all draw on each other, but you will have a natural emphasis towards one. And it's great to study the Upanishads. The Upanishads are the wealth of the Vedas. I mean, there's so much wonderful information, but I do not agree that eventually you outgrow bhakti and you have to go into this kind of approach. One thing, an important answer is every single person has their own way. Ma said, as many people as there are, that's how many paths there are. There'll be, and she said, no two people will practice even the same sadhana in the same way. You may be doing the exact same practice, but everyone will have their own way of doing it. I lived in this one ashram for many years before going back to India, where everyone had to follow this one way that everybody did it. And Ma said, if a person does not have the freedom to experience their own way of doing it, their own way of expressing it, they will be stagnated. And when I got back to India and I was given the freedom then just to really do sadhana for many hours a day, I fell into my own way of doing. I wouldn't say fell into. I would say I expanded into. I was able to open up my own way of doing my sadhana, which produced much vaster effects. So, in one way, there's not an answer to that. Everyone will find their own way, and someone could evolve from bhakti into a more Vedantic approach just naturally. But I don't agree that you have to or that it will happen. And I will say that bhakti is a perfect, complete path in itself. And it does in the same way. You think of God as almost not really, it's never totally external, but you think of God as an external being. You worship God, and then you find that he becomes he, she. Let's say she. This is the way I think of God. You find that she, the divine, becomes more experienced internally, and it evolves through our maturation, I guess you could say, our evolution of becoming more competent in sadhana. And it will change. Our whole approach will change as we mature. And it does become more internal. But I can say I never give up the idea of worshiping God externally, where I do feel God more internally now. And like when I saw Anandamayi Ma as an external person, it was wonderful. But now I find her even more vividly alive and real as an internal consciousness. I just have to turn my eyes, and she's right there inside of me. Um, so
Thank
I think
you.
the answer would be bhakti is complete. Every person's path is different, and it can evolve into that, but it doesn't have to. Does that answer your question?
Yes, very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have still a little time, I think.
Yeah, we have at least another minute.
Well, Ramdev, I very much appreciate your invitation to come and speak with you and have this time. And I love sharing things with you and going back and forth because we have so much common ground. And I'm grateful for everybody coming and listening.
Mangalananda and Ramdev, may I read a short poem?
Of course.
Ramdev?
Of course.
It's a very short poem. It's called Simple Living. Ramakrishna in Samadhi, like a flower in the garden of the Dakshineshwar temple. Ramakrishna in Samadhi, like a flower in the garden of the Dakshineshwar temple. A glass of water that Ramakrishna asked for, with little of it gone. A bed and couch, a few holy pictures that grace a room where Ramakrishna sits, listening to people who come to see him. In the temple, Kalima talking.
Wonderful. And I think that is a good place to end. I'm sorry, Nirmala, we have reached the end of our time together. Everyone here will receive a recording. We'll send you in the next few days a Dropbox link to the recording. Mangalananda has monthly Anandamayi satsangs. Possibly, John, you could put the link to that in the chat.
Yeah, that'd be great. It's every third Sunday of the month at 1 o'clock Pacific, 4 o'clock Eastern. And it's on Zoom. And we just study Ma's life and teachings and have readings and discussions. It's a lot of fun.
I put a link to Mangalananda's website.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's
And
there.
we have a tiny request. Finish your thought.
Yeah.
And for Mangalananda, if you would be willing to close us with a chant, that would be lovely. That little request
Yes,
is
people are requesting if we could close with you leading us in prayer.
Mhm.
Okay, well, I won't do a kirtan. Actually, for those who are local in the Bay Area, I have a great kirtan band. These wonderful musicians. We have so much fun. I was supposed to do a kirtan night at Indigo Yoga in San Francisco, but I had to cancel it because of my head. But we'll be uh in the South Bay I'm looking at the date. The Ananda community, the Yogananda community, will be at their temple on July 19th at 7 o'clock if you're in San Francisco. Come and sing kirtan with us. Yeah.
What was that date?
July 19th and in Palo Alto at the Ananda community. Yeah. Okay, well, you want to do some closing mantras? I won't get my harmonium and go through all that, but I'll just go. See, my brain is so bad now, I can't think. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinah Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet. May all beings be happy. May all beings experience the unity of life. Om Asatoma Sadgamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirme Edhi. Lead us from darkness, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Sri Sri Anandamayi Mata ki jai. Apne apne Sadgurudev Bhagavan ki jai.
Yay. Thank you all so much. What a blessing it has been to be together. We invite you to come to the Living Dying Project website. We are expecting in the next few months to have Nina Rao as part of our guest speaker series and Dr. Aditi Sethi. And maybe there are more people in the future that I can't remember right now, but we plan to have at least one person a month. And these are a benefit for the project. Mangalananda has very generously come to be with us today. He has become a dear friend of mine in a very short amount of time. It seems like a long lost brother. Thank you. Thank you, Mangalananda Ji, for being here.
Yes,
Thank
and let's
all
get
of
something
you.
on the calendar to meet and have dinner again.
I was going to say that, and we will. I will call you up or send you a text sometime during this weekend.
Okay.
Ram.
Ram Ram.
Um,